Good afternoon, everybody. It's Debbie Evans and Rolo here, and today we're going back into the first book in the series of The Secret Adventures of Rolo. This one is Athelstan and the Time Tunnel, and we're returning to Marlborough. This chapter 11, is all about Rolo's encounter with somebody there, so off we go. Brave little pup, I have another local historic event for you to witness, said Athelstan from his usual barky rap around the oak tree. The tiny woodland folk had already had their instructions, and when they told me we were going to the redundant church in the high street called St. Peter's, I wondered at the necessity of using the time tunnel, as this was only a short walk downhill from home. Silly Paddy Paws, exclaimed Julia. You need to go back to 1498, and I doubt the landscape of the town now resembles anything like what you're going to see. For a start, there wasn't a road running either side of the church, making it into an island. I felt rather foolish and decided not to speak at all, to save further embarrassment. Coming out from the time tunnel at the west end of the high street, I saw exactly what Julia meant. The church stood proudly in a field, and at the other end I saw St. Mary's of the Cat in the Fire drama, although that wouldn't even happen for another 150 years or so. As I approached the rather grand Norman church with fine square tower enclosed within the width of the famously wide High Street, in the 15th century just a wide cart track, I realised that a ceremony of some importance was about to happen. I mingled with the townsfolk, away from the solemn procession of dignitaries, and stood just inside the porch door to see what was going on. It turned out to be the ordination of a priest. Not terribly exciting, I thought to myself. Then I did a double take, as the young priest who was to be ordained approached, following the bishop in his tall mitre, carrying the traditional crook. I recognised the man from likenesses in history books, and dotted around the church in modern times, this was Thomas Wolsey. Athelstan had told me about the butcher's son who would go on to negotiate the tricky Field of the Cloth of Gold meeting between Henry VIII and Francis I of France some 20 years later. He had risen high in the king's favour by then, playing off allegiances with the Pope in Rome, with the all-powerful France and Spain changing sides to suit his advantage. Cardinal Wolsey famously engineered the break with the church in Rome over Henry VIII's divorce from Catherine of Aragon, so that the king was free to pursue and eventually marry Anne Boleyn. This created the Church of England split from the church in Rome, although Wolsey failed in his promise to secure an annulment to the marriage from the Pope. Because of this failing, Anne Boleyn ultimately engineered the greedy cardinal's downfall and arrest in 1529, as she saw him as being too power-hungry for his own personal gain, rather than acting out of loyalty to the crown, or more precisely, the would-be queen. All this preceded the Queen's own execution in 1536. But that was in his future. Young Thomas Wolsey was about to be ordained priest. There is a commotion on the steps. The crowd are jostling to follow the procession into the nave of the church. Out! Shouted a thick-set man brandishing a pike. He resembled a bookend, as he was identical to his partner, same height and stature and unsmiling face. They could have been ancestors of the guardsmen on the common during the Civil War. No dogs allowed in a holy building. The crowd parted to let me exit through the building with some dignity. I didn't think I could communicate with this ignorant peasant, and anyway, I doubted he would listen. I realised that there was no way I was going to get past these two lumps, so I sat down in the churchyard and gathered my feet in. I had to rethink my strategy. Opposite the churchyard and along the track a little was a hostelry called the Star. I ducked inside unchallenged and overheard 2 serving girls complaining that they didn't want to work today as it was their day off, but the landlord said it was going to be very busy in the inn after the ordination ceremony. To avoid being seen by these ladies, who seemed to be doing something to the barrels of ale with a pitcher of water, I snuck under the bar and immediately spied a small door, and being naturally curious, I pushed it open and went in. I almost fell headlong down a steep ladder, and there I was in the cellar. No idea what might be down there other than barrels of beer and butts of wine, but having nothing better to do, I scampered in the dark and found a narrow passageway. Of course, as you knew I would, I pressed on. I edged my way through the darkness without the benefit of Yulia and Dar's pinpricks of light to help me find my way. I sniffed along the cold and damp, smelly stone walls of the passageway, which seemed to go on forever, and then I hit a dead end. What now? Here I was underneath the star, or was I? I seemed to have travelled a fair distance underground. Maybe this would come up somewhere else. I looked around in the dark and saw the vague outline of a square of light above me, a trapdoor. But where was I? I pushed it open with my head and stuck my paws through and heaved myself up through the hole. I could hear voices chanting in Latin and realised I must be somewhere in the church. I'd managed to get in to see the ordination of Wolsey after all. The trapdoor had come out in a very narrow space, and here I was in the base of the church tower, just inside the porch, where the heavies were standing on the other side of the wooden door. How lucky was that? I bounded up the stone spiral staircase, thinking I would get a better view of proceedings from above. Something nudged me, sturdy rope. Now, if I could get hold of it in my teeth, I could manoeuvre myself to get a better viewing position. Unfortunately for me, this was not an ordinary rope hanging there. It was attached to an enormous bronze bell, and just at the relevant part of the solemn ceremony taking place in the nave of the church below, a very loud clanging rang out, causing the whole congregation to wonder if it was in fact a sign from the Almighty himself. The magnificent bell was not scheduled to be rung until after the ceremony had finished. The bishop paused mid-sentence, but was assured in a whisper by a member of the clergy that it was an overzealous bell ringer who would be severely dealt with afterwards for disturbing the solemn proceedings. Oops, better get out of there before I was discovered red-pawed. It didn't seem that exciting an event anyway. I knew I'd dropped a clanger and wondered who would get into trouble instead of me, and I also thought it best not to hang around, so I let go of the rope, causing the bell to toll even more frantically. I exited the church the same way, back through the trapdoor, along the damp passageway and back into the cellar, up the steep steps and out through the inn, much to the amusement of the serving girls who were still busily watering down the ale. Outside the Star in the empty street, I saw a man being set upon by 2 robbers. Presumably they were opportunists who saw rich pickings at a big gathering of townsfolk for a church event. I barked at them and snapped round their ankles, and although they tried to kick me away, I didn't give up. Eventually they fled, and their victim was very grateful, clutching his purse and patting me. He gave me a morsel of bread from his pack by way of reward and poured wine from a skin into the palm of his hand so I could have a drink. I couldn't communicate with him, but I wagged my tail. He looked round nervously. I could see the escaping robbers who probably thought they'd got away with their haul. Bold as brass, they had squatted down under a tall tree and were emptying out the loot on the ground, presumably to share it before going their separate ways. The man I'd just saved was brushing himself down and took his leave of the scene. He didn't seem to want to do anything about the robbers. Thanks to me, nothing of his had been stolen. Rather selfish, I thought. He disappeared in the direction of the town. What to do now? I couldn't let them escape justice. How could I restrain these robbers? They were drinking something from a skin bottle, passing it between them and staggering about, no doubt celebrating their good fortune. That might work to my advantage. I ducked inside the back entrance of the Star and saw a coil of rope lying in the yard. I picked it up in my teeth and carried it to the base of the tree. They didn't even notice me as their greedy eyes took in the value of their haul. I used the element of surprise to confound the men as they sat leaning their backs against the tree, and quick as anything, I ran round and round, barking as fiercely as I could. Having flung the rope coil diagonally over my shoulder, I managed in this way to secure them to the tree. I think they may have had a little too much to drink, as they certainly seemed incapable of putting up a fight. I could see a silver goblet and some jewellery lying scattered on the ground. The ceremony was still going on inside St. Peter's, and as there was no one else likely to enter the church building at this time, I thought I could perhaps draw the attention of the guards and alert them to this crime scene in the absence of any kind of police force, as we were only at the end of the 15th century. "You again," roared one of the guards as I jumped up and niftily dodged his heavy boot. He kicked the wall instead and cursed. Not good for a church guard, I thought. I somehow had to get them to follow me. I jumped up at the other one and plucked his coin purse from his belt in my teeth and made off with it. That had the desired effect. "Why, you little, come back here!" And I fled the scene with the purse in my mouth, drawing them towards the two befuddled robbers I had left roped together around the tree. "Heavens preserve us, what have we got here?" said the one whose purse I'd pinched, his item now forgotten. "Oh no, Reynolds, we can't be having no crime on our patch. We're supposed to be on guard duty round here. We're up for promotion to the King's Guard if all goes well on our watch today." "Well, what do we do now? We won't get promoted if this gets out, and worse, we might be blamed," said Percy. "Well, there's only one thing for it. We have to dig to get rid of the hoard." "We can always come back for it later," said Reynolds slyly. "Remember where we're burying it." I gave a little yelp. I could help with the digging, I knew full well, and by the glint in those oafs' eyes, that's exactly what they were thinking. I backed away, barking, and dropped the guard's purse. Not very heroic, but there was nothing I could do about these stolen jewels now, other than flee the scene. I certainly didn't intend to become an accessory to helping them hide the loot for their own ill-gotten gain. I ran for it as far as my short furry legs would carry me, all the way back to the time tunnel entrance, and was too breathless to tell Yulia what had happened. As I glanced back over my shoulder, I saw the two men set to work with shovels, no doubt borrowed from the Star, digging away at the mud, right next to the spot where the robbers slumped, snoring their heads off, tied together back to back, and probably dreaming of how they would spend their loot. Must remember to wipe my feet as I go back through the trapdoor this time. So that's the end of that chapter. I will just read a little bit further one of Rolo's dog blogs. These are things that happen in his everyday life. "It's been difficult to get on here lately with the floppy-haired boy not being at school for the holidays. I have to wait till he's gone out on his skateboard. This week I discovered I'm a real foodie dog. Having recently developed a taste for raspberries, I also find I love olives, mozzarella cheese and sun-dried tomatoes, and any other fine foods left on the coffee table at nose height. Everyone went out into the garage to admire something to do with the floppy-haired boy's summer DT project, and I seized the main chance. Most affronted to be caught in the act and lifted unceremoniously off the coffee table just as I was getting to slurp up the olive oil. A dog of good taste, but not very good manners, the smiley lady said crossly. Lovely weather at least, perfect for romping on the downs, and we went to Fifield and found lots of big ancient stones lying about in the fields, which made the smiley lady very happy. They were called grey wethers because from a distance they apparently resemble sheep, also called wethers. I suppose they do, just the right height for weeing on as far as I'm concerned. Another day we went to Westwoods and found many muddy puddles despite 4 days of drying sunshine, so another bath in the sink awaited me at home as my original base colour is white. One summer evening, the smiley lady took me to Potterne, and I watched her jolly friend muck out some horses, and I discovered that I quite liked the taste of horse poo, not to my not so smiley lady's horror. Well, it's just recycled grass, isn't it? We had a marvellous walk from Potterne Cricket Club, all round the edge of a wheat field and past One Tree Hill. New territory to explore. Now, ending up in a pub in Urchfont, but alas, neither beer nor chicken curry came my way, just for the ladies. I know the Shire horses like to drink beer, and I would have quite liked to taste it. Instead, I sat quietly under the table in the evening sunshine and was much admired by the eaters and drinkers in the pub garden. The smiley lady hired a big noisy machine and spent the next day cleaning the carpets, so I was banished from the house. Every time I came in, I had to stop on the doorstep to have my paws wiped for the umpteenth time. Oh, the indignity of it all. Made the mistake of weeing on the kitchen tiles this morning. I knew straight away I shouldn't have done it and hoped it would quickly evaporate, but alas no, it was discovered and I was in the doghouse for a while. I wanted to point out that at least it wasn't on the newly shampooed carpets, but no one was listening. Right, time for a little nap and then hopefully off for more adventure. So, that's the end of my readings for this week. Thank you very much for joining us. Rolo's actually managed to stay awake this afternoon, despite a very long and chilly walk this morning. We'll be back again on Monday afternoon at 3:30 with further adventures from Rolo's books. Meanwhile, have a lovely weekend and keep warm. Bye for now.